They used to attend an exclusive Catholic school located in the region. For the parents of these men, their future was already aligned and promising. They had paid for the highest quality university studies so that they could later dedicate their working lives to being executives of the most recognized companies. None of the three were bad students, on the contrary. They always strived to give their best and get good grades. However, behind the kind appearance and good manners, they hid their true selves, carrying out acts of what is now known as group bullying, bothering men and women alike regardless of their age. Their influences filled them with courage, so they participated in violent demonstrations, even committed armed robberies, not out of necessity or anything like that. But they did it to prove to each other that they were brave enough to do anything they set their minds to. Andrea Aguirre was the one they described as the most fearsome of the trio. She was the leader. His friends admired him because, among other things, he had been tried for a rape and was temporarily locked up in a prison, a fact that made him feel proud and which he used to boast about. This is the part of the story where two girls, Donatella Colasanti and Rosaria Lopez, aged 17 and 19 respectively, come in. Both lived in a neighborhood, which, let's say, was not humble, but it was not filled with luxuries either. They attended school and worked occasionally to pay for their tastes, like going to dances, buying clothes, going out, or going to the movies. It was to give you an idea of the middle class. Anyone would say it was impossible for the lives of the two parties to cross, as besides being different, they had nothing in common. However, there was a fateful coincidence. It was an early September afternoon, when the young girls were leaving the cinema, that they met a boy, a friend of the three rich kids, who would introduce them days later without imagining the consequences. On the afternoon of September 29th, 1975, Donatella and Rosaria met in the center of Rome with Guido, Iso, and Gira. They had agreed to go to the cinema and maybe have a drink afterwards. But the three men proposed other plans. They wanted to spend the day at the weekend house of one of their parents. These types of homes are usually used by families with a high purchasing power to spend a few days in them. The main goal is to get away from the routine, as they are also usually far from the city. The residence was located by the sea in San Felice de Circeo, Italy, an area that enjoyed a good level of exclusivity. Upon arrival, Rosalia and Donatella couldn't even appreciate 10 minutes of the landscape. When he did, he was already threatening them with a revolver and asking them to take off all the clothes they were wearing. For about 2 days, exactly 36 hours, the three young men took turns to torture, beat, and abuse the girls. When they got tired of being abused, they were locked in a bathroom from where they were later taken out again to continue violating them. The entertainment didn't last long, and they got tired of everything they were doing, deciding to take their lives. They drowned Rosalia in a bath tube while Donatella was beaten until she was left motionless on the floor. In this way, the day was coming to an end and it was beginning to get dark. So the plan of the subjects was to abandon the bodies on a little frequented highway or a vacant lot, all with the aim that no one could link the murders with them. They then wrapped the bodies in sheets and put them in the trunk of ISO's Fiat 147 car, in which they drove to Rome. Because there was still light, they couldn't throw the wrapped bodies. They ran the risk of someone seeing them and accusing them. It was then that they decided to park the car for a few hours and go eat. They arrived at a restaurant and had a fun time before finishing the job, if you can call this a job. At no point did the men think that Donatella could be alive after such a tremendous beating. But she was. The girl remained still and silent inside the trunk until she heard the car finally stop. It was only when she heard the guys walk away and a good amount of time had passed that she decided to act. She screamed with all her might for help and hit the vehicle as hard as she could to be heard. A man who was casually walking by heard her. At first he doubted whether to continue his journey or see what was happening inside the car, but in the end he decided to call the police. Thanks to the young woman being able to speak and say who her abusers were, Guido and Iso were arrested by the authorities, while Guira managed to escape apparently because an informant inside the police warned him that they were after him to arrest him. At the trial, Donatella spoke in detail about what had happened, the heartbreaking moments she had lived with her late friend. Represented by lawyer Tina Langostena, she not only recounted all the facts, but also answered each of the questions that the killer's defense asked her because they decided to go. Is a good girl to accept the invitation of a man who proposes to go to a house alone? What did they do for men to behave like this? All these questions that later became the banner of the feminist flag at that time. made the woman look guilty for the simple fact of being one. A girl couldn't be the same as a man or she was labeled as easy. She couldn't dress as she wanted because she was blamed for provoking men. Femicide was not defined, but it was one. All the events indicated so. Something that these same questions continue to answer today. Unfortunately, not much has changed. According to the chronicles of the time, they all tell that far from feeling intimidated, the young woman looked her victims face to face, right in the eyes, with courage. The trial had an impressive media impact, as all the media wondered how it was possible that young people with a promising future coming from a wealthy family were capable of committing such vile acts, coming from a being that could not be defined as a human. Not even an animal was capable of replicating what they had done to them. Various representatives from several movements defending women wrote articles on the subject, connecting the crime with political issues of gender and security. This trial was so important that it became a before and after for the future judicial treatment in cases of abuse or rape, a complete watershed for the three legislative, executive, and judicial powers. Hizo was sentenced to life imprisonment, while Guido was sentenced to 30 years in prison. On the other hand, although Andrea seemed to have completely vanished from the face of the earth, he was also sentenced to life imprisonment despite his absence. For a long time, Donatella took on the role of speaking up for women and participating in marches, as well as leading a movement that demanded rapes be recognized as a crime against personal freedom and not as one against public morality. Generally, crimes against public morality were considered minor, as they were related to hostile, humiliating, or degrading acts or attacks towards a person that supposedly did not deserve much relevance. Among these were considered sexual assaults. But it wasn't until the year 96 that Law Number 66 against sexual violence was approved, which finally recognized this principle that Donatella fought so hard for. Much more recently, in the year 2005, it became a year full of many news related to this case, as it was known that the person who had been previously sentenced to life imprisonment managed to get prison leaves authorized thanks to his good behavior and certain influences he continued to obtain. Of course, he didn't take long to show that the authorities had made a mistake in granting him these permits, as on one of his temporary outings in the month of April, he sought out and took the life of the wife and daughter of one of his prison mates as revenge for an outstanding account he had with the subject. Upon learning of the unfortunate event, Donatella stated the following: "Nobody wanted to listen to me. They should not have let him continue." On the other hand, you are probably wondering about this. Well, the location. Guira's location was a mystery to investigators for years, who still had the file open in their search. And it was just in the year 2005 that the truth was known. It was discovered that Andrea had fled to Spain after a friend of his in the police warned him that they were after him. Once he arrived in the country, he enlisted in the Foreign Legion, a branch of the Army's military service, where he said his name was Massimo Testa, presenting a series of false documents that accredited him as such. In the Legion, he was promoted to first corporal, but in September of '93, he was expelled from the army due to illegal substance use. After a year, he died of an overdose in Melilla, a Spanish autonomous city located in North Africa, on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. In this way, this criminal was buried as Massimo Testa in the cemetery of Purisima of the city. Thanks to the interception of communications between members of the Aguirre family, elements found out the truth and closed the investigation folder that intended to find the man alive. It was also precisely in the year 2005 that Donatella lost her life. The woman died of cancer at the young age of 47, but returning to the movie Catholic School, the feature film directed by Stefano Mordini completely evades the trial and instead focuses on telling the personalities of the characters as well as their motivations. It can be considered a product that takes total freedom with the true facts, as everything is modified to improve the narrative of the story. According to Mordini, it's not just about showing the event, but also a time, a historical period, a society as part of the criminals. This is what the filmmaker assured at the press conference of the Venice Festival when presenting the movie. "I did not want to highlight a political conflict, but a gender conflict in which a man exercises violence against a woman, and therefore against the entire female world." In this way, the filmmaker concluded his conference. But if you've already seen this movie, leave your comments down below. If you like this video and you have a paranormal story that you would like me to tell, you can send it to my email, which is mail@pepamysterio.com.mx, or if not, send it to me through social networks, and let's take advantage of the fact that we are in the month of Halloween.